Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co-host, Kevin David Gridner. Before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles. Number one, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. And we believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity. We aren't here to win arguments, we're here to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally and we follow where authenticity leads us. So go ahead, pull up a chair, grab a drink. Let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So, Kevin, today I want to pick up a thread that we started quite a while ago, and we promised people basically that we were going to talk about this some other time. And so, for those of you guys who are accountants and keep track of promises made and not delivered upon, you can
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. You can rest your conscience now. And but the topic is around the kindness, niceness, gentleness as a type of performative measure. It's not inherently good. In fact, I mean, it doesn't mean it's inherently evil either, but it can be both for good and and for evil, to be honest. And so, I guess maybe a simple way to open this up, Kevin, would be, I don't know. Do you want to talk about ways that this has shown up first of all in your life and what that's looked like for you?
Well, I think that like big picture, as you say that, and we were talking about this yesterday and kind of back and forth. And what originally came to my mind was like those dynamics you just put into place, kindness versus niceness, gentleness, kindness versus, what's on the other side of that. Um, you know, Possessiveness, parasitic behavior, things like that. So we've got these dynamics. And what struck me in the midst of that is something one of my mentors used to say to me all the time. She used to say, be careful of the well you draw from, you will drink from that well. And so the source of where it's coming from, I think, is vastly important. So like
Explain.
if we looked at the kindness versus niceness dynamic, we've covered this before. Niceness is essentially people pleasing when you
Right.
get down to it. I don't want to upset you. I want to manage you. I want to make sure you're not upset with me, make sure there's peace or it's smooth in my environment. So I'm going to frame all my responses based on what will accomplish that goal.
Right.
So it can be strategic.
Right.
And I hesitate to say manipulative because generally the person that's doing it does not see it as manipulative.
It's just some kind of goal orientation. There's some place that we want to get to, and with that, there's a lot of can easily be rationales of, well, I mean, it's a good goal. Like, of course we want this, right?
Right, right, exactly. Like, why would we not want this? And quite often it has to do with keeping the peace or managing. And so in reality, it's like, no, I'm in a chaotic environment and I don't like what happens when this gets chaotic. So I'm going to it's almost like a personal formation. I become this in response to my chaotic environment. And there's an act of avoidance there as well. That instead of confronting the chaotic environment, I do the nice thing. I change myself instead of confronting the environment.
Right.
And
I
and there's
mean,
really a lot of ties to ego development in this. Like the methodology that I use to protect myself within my space, within my world, my gifts, my talents, my choices, my coping mechanisms, all these things that come together to create my ego. Like there's a personal formation that is happening there. And I think that personal formation, that ego gets formed out of we've talked about this before, the four core needs that I believe God made us with: the need for acceptance, belonging, being known, and being loved in the knowing. If I'm not getting one or all of those, I start to change myself to accomplish that goal.
Right.
And that's the ego, in my estimation. It's kind of like what Paul talks about he goes through this whole thing in Romans chapter 7. He comes down to it like he's like, it's my flesh. Well, the word used, translated flesh there in Greek is sarx, sarx. And that doesn't just mean the physical flesh. It's really more akin to how I've learned to protect myself in this world, my defense mechanisms, my ego, everything that I've used to strategically place myself in this world to not get hurt, if that makes sense.
So here's an analogy. Let me see if this fits. But the basic idea is within an engine, you've got oh man, I forget the name of this part, but you basically have the part of the engine that regulates between the gears and the man. I'm going to show my absolute stupidity here, but between the gears and the like the car
The engine that's turning the gears.
right, that's turning the gears. And so the difference is effectively in that context is you're becoming that middle piece that will warp yourself into any direction necessary in order to allow both to peaceably continue at whatever rate they want to go, rather
Yeah,
than insisting that, well, we probably should, one of you guys has to slow down or speed up in order to synchronize.
yeah,
It can't pay the full price of this contortion to get you
yeah.
guys to get along.
My dad would roll over in his grave if he heard me say this wrong, but I think that's called the differential, which translates the motion from the engine to the transmission. He was a mechanic his whole life, so I could be completely wrong about that. He may be cursing me from the beyond right now, like, that you were raised with this. But it's, yes, the ego is something that allows the motion of the engine, the world around me, to determine my motion, the transmission. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's an apt analogy.
And so then so clearly the basis is if or some of the formation of this centers around if there's chaos. Okay, sorry, let me start here. One of the things you're not saying is that we should just tolerate chaos. That's not what you're saying.
Oh, no, 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 no. I mean, there are going to be times where you have to because it is out of your control. But how you interact with that chaos is what I'm talking about.
Sure, but it's not like chaos needs to become normative.
No, no, no. Oh God, no.
So so
Well, I mean, chaos becoming normative. You're a human being, right? Chaos is the norm in our world.
right, but there's a return to an equilibrium.
Exactly. There should be waves.
And the size and frequency of those waves determine in some capacity health. And granted, there has to be an admission that things happen beyond our control, and sometimes big waves beyond our control. Like that's we're admitting that, but um,
Right.
and so for a child in a chaotic environment, the immediate question probably comes down to safety. Um,
Yeah.
am I safe here? And the follow up question
Most
to that,
often, most often emotionally safe.
sure,
In extreme cases, physically unsafe. Those are horrific situations. They do happen. We all know that abuse does happen within homes, emotional and physical, that kind of thing. But mostly it's emotional safety related to that acceptance and belonging and being known and being loved and the knowing, I think.
so you're viewing the knowing and being known as lending to felt safety, not felt safety leading to the questioning of belonging, or is it both?
Right.
Okay, you're drawing the
I
distinction.
would I would probably there's probably percentages on either, but I would say the lion's share is on the former.
Right.
Just my opinion outside looking in.
And so, teasing apart the pieces even further, if you're in an environment where the knowing doesn't happen, it implies that by very definition you have some kind of unbending standard.
Yes, right. Which suggests what? The unbending standard, what's the message it always delivers?
Well, it's never being enough. That
Will be like me. It's
be like
conformity.
that's fair.
I remember when I was a little kid, like, and not much has changed. I can still be so emotional. And it shocks people other than those who are around me all the time and know this. Like I could be really, really emotional, and still to this day, I can be emotional in the sense of felt emotion and expression of it, whether it's tears or it's passion and speech or that kind of thing. Um, and my dad was not. He was very stoic, and I don't think I think I saw him cry maybe twice in the entirety of my life. And in that sense, he he would say things like, "Do you want me to give you something to cry about?"
Right.
And so in those moments, it was like, "Be like me." It wasn't a knowing that for whatever reason, whether it's how God made me or circumstances or whatever, I was more emotional. Like it's really hard because like it was the message was delivered, "Be like me." And even more recently, it was fascinating and somewhat disturbing to me. My wife and I had dinner with my niece, who's in her early 20s, and she's my brother's daughter. And at the dinner, she was giving him a hard time because he seems to cry at funerals, and she was kind of letting him have it. And not in a demeaning way, not in a harsh way, more in like a poking fun at him. And I had to stop her, and then I was like, "Hey, like you have to understand what we were raised in. Like having emotion was not okay. So what I think you're probably seeing in those moments is the spilling over of something built up, and in a funeral's a very appropriate place for that to pour out. Kind of thing. So it just kind of like highlighted for me, oh, like my brother's the same way. He's now he's 56, but he's not emotional now. He really isn't. I'm the way more emotional one. But like we were raised in that same environment, and I could see the process of conform to this. This is the right thing. And so we were trying to conform to it, but didn't feel like enough because we couldn't. And my brother's closer to my dad than I am as far as conforming to it. And so there's this dynamic that's going on there.
So, teasing apart the pieces. So then, the question becomes. I mean, if the goal is to be like somebody else, okay. So then, gracious. Wow. Okay. So in an individual context, it's like you trying to be like your dad. Is like you trying not to be emotional, not to express emotion because
Right.
that's the standard. But then what where the breakdown really happens, and you can argue that however terribly we do this, there's actually some semblance in which, again, it depends how close, how vast the difference is that we need to cover, but that here's what I'm trying to say. When you introduce a second person into the equation, what happens when you have I'm just completely making this up. Let's say you have your mom would be highly emotional, and she also has the "be like me" kind of mentality. So now,
Which I did.
which you did, this is fascinating. So,
Yeah.
so with your dad, if it were just your dad or just your mom, I mean, obviously with your mom, like that's easy. Like, okay, like let me just be myself, and that's fine, and we can have this close relationship. With your dad, you can you can con- you can conform or perform to a certain degree, but when you have two different individuals who have, if they have, and I don't know if your mom was like this, but if your mom has a be like me kind of mentality as well, then suddenly you're this child pulled in two different directions, and like there is no possible way to win. You go from
Right.
maybe I can kind of win a little bit with one person to it's a guaranteed failure one way or the other.
Right. Which in that you're describing it perfectly, at least to my experience. So when I feel as a kid and into my adulthood, when I felt that pull between the two poles, I would just dissociate. I'd go somewhere else mentally. It was like there's a thought process my mind would go, and then people like, hey, I'm over here, and snap me back into it. And because I couldn't handle it.
Right.
These two icons or poles of my existence are pulling me in two different ways, and I can't satisfy either one. And most of the time they're not, the pull isn't great, but in the times where it does get intense, boom, I'm gone.
Go on. I have another question along those lines. This triggers something I've been a thought process I've been kind of wondering about. But it seems to me like when you look at, I mean, dissociation is a very easy. I mean, is a coping mechanism for doing this. It has its own downsides, but it's a way to resolve the conflict. Like what else? And especially as a kid, like if you can't physically remove yourself from the situation, well, at least you can remove yourself mentally and emotionally, like
Right.
to a degree. And so I would assume, I would expect, and also given my experience, that dissociation becomes some kind of form of, I mean, it becomes habitual. And so then the question is, what happens when you stop the habit of dissociation? And suddenly, again, my experience, I'm curious what it is from your experience, but suddenly you're faced with the reality of the raw pain of not being able to, like, it really is the ripping off the band-aid, it gets worse before it gets better experience. Like
Yeah.
with dissociation, you can have this happy, beautiful life. Everything's all good. I mean, you're absent for a substantial portion of it, but it's all good, feels good, life's normal. If you choose not to dissociate, then suddenly you go from this kind of idyllic life to like hell on earth while you
Yeah.
come to grips with the reality of the situation that you were in. Is that a fair description? And I'm curious what your experience is like with that as well.
I think it's fair. Um, for me, it was like when I became really aware of it, it was probably in my late 20s, early 30s, how much I dissociated, how much I lived in my head apart from interactions with other people. It became very clear. And the thing that kept coming back to me, I remember having this conversation with people I knew, therapists, God, and it would be like, okay, so you're asking me to take the thing that has protected me my whole life and lay it down and stand here naked in front of the world. And I remember over and over again, some people would be like, well, no, you got to do it slowly over time and be more gentle with it. Some people would be like, yeah, that's what I'm asking. And what I always felt back from God in the midst of that prayer was over time, and it's going to be painful, but it's better for you. You're connected to me and to the world at that point. Because what I'm sure everybody following along or watching here has seen the movie Forrest Gump. Well, there's this scene where little Forrest and little Jenny, Forrest and Jenny run into the cornfield and they're escaping Jenny's father. And they get deep enough in and the camera views like over the cornfield so you can see them and you can see the father coming out the back door and he's screaming for Jenny. And she's sitting there praying and she's praying something along the lines of God give me wings so I can fly away. Right? And then you see that play out in that movie throughout Jenny's life. Anytime it gets too intense, too tough, whatever, she gets wings to fly away. And there's this one scene, I think it's probably one of the most powerful scenes in the movie. I think she's in San Francisco or something. She's in this high-rise building, and it's like New Year's Eve, and she stands up, like she goes out on the patio, and there's a railing, and she stands up on the railing, ready to fly. And something snaps in her, and she gets back off. But it's almost like a fulfillment of that God give me wings, teach help me to fly away kind of thing. When it's so painful that you can't stay in it as a child, you develop this world, this methodology. Like that is how Jenny learned to survive, by escaping. And even that famous line from the movie that everybody knows, like "Run, Forrest, run." She's giving him her wisdom in that moment. Run, run, escape, fly. And even when he goes off to Vietnam, she says, if you hear something, if you see something, you feel in danger, run the other way. Just run. She's sharing her ethos with him throughout the movie. And finally, at the end, when she can't run from the thing, she has AIDS and she knows she's going to die. She finally comes back home. And that's, to me, that's the beauty of that film. In the arc of Jenny is that she finally comes to understand that running, escaping, flying away protected her for a time, but it's been the thing that has destroyed her.
Right.
And I think that's the ripping off of the band-aid, is at some point you come to this place where you recognize that that thing, that the dissociation, where I went, how I handled it, the ego development actually is destroying me, isolating me. And that's when the band-aid gets ripped off.
Yeah.
Or at least that's been my experience and what I've felt about it. And then others who I've walked with, or things I've read, or people I've talked to, like it kind of seems to be a very common human experience.
I mean, it makes sense. Um, I'm just stuck on the fact that you listed out God therapists, and I was in the list as well. I, I, okay, sorry guys. I have regular jokes with my colleagues.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Regular jokes with my colleagues, which I jokingly grasp for every strand by which to bolster my ego. The
Don't we all?
don't we all? Um, yeah, I mean, and this all centers back around the themes that we've talked about repeatedly. Has been around the um, the themes of entering the desert, and like these types of things really are around this experience of I will choose not to run. I will choose to be present in my situation, no matter how and tolerate the. I, how about we phrase this like this? I will choose to be present in my situation insofar as my emotional resilience and my pain tolerance will allow me to.
Right. Well, and that too, there's a few things here that you said that kind of triggering thoughts in me. You were talking about if that child doesn't have the being known, that's what you're kind of pulling apart in the midst of this. If they have the conformity, if they don't have the known, then they will shape who they are to that person, and they will use their gifts and talents. And there's a connection there to what Carl Jung said as far as shadow work. One of his biggest contributions to understanding humanity was the idea of shadow work. And as I understand it, what he is saying is that thing that you have could be your greatest talent, can also be your greatest weakness. The shadow work is coming to understand the depth of the damage you can do with that gift.
Right.
And Jordan Peterson talks about it all the time. He talks about people becoming dangerous, and people blanch at that, like, why are you dangerous? And he goes, because I'm not talking about them becoming dangerous. I'm talking about them coming to understand their capacity for danger and bringing it under control. So you want to talk about evil as parasitic. That is the dark side, the danger of the dark side of that gift is not being under control. It's not being controlled. It's not being shaped. It's not being directed. It's not being discipled, whatever language you want to use for it. And so it's in control of that person.
Right.
Whereas to do
When,
the shadow work is to come to the understanding that I have this capacity and I have to bring it under control. And the other thing that I think the last point on that, from what you just said, is at some point you're going to have to come face to face with the fear, with the pain, with the insecurity, with the lust, the whatever it is inside us. You have to come face to face with it, and you have to stare it down and grow in strength in staring it down. It's like for me, great illustration of this is in the movie Rocky 3, which came out in like 82 or something, so I'm dating myself. And there's this whole the bad guy in the movie is Mr. T, and Rocky is going to fight him. And he sets up this first fight. His manager doesn't want him to do it. He talks his manager into it, like all that kind of stuff. Well, in the lead up to the fight, walking into the arena, a scuffle breaks out. His manager is hit or knocked down, that kind of thing. He already has a heart condition. He can't go out and be with him, so he's in the ring by himself. Talk about like the band-aid getting ripped off. This support, this father figure, this covering, this thing, this guy that was this for me. He's gone now. And he just gets destroyed. And he goes back into the locker room and he gets to have a few last words with him, but his manager dies. And in that moment, he loses everything. Everything he believed he had. Not only his covering, his family figure, his da 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 da, but his self-confidence, his sense of self. Like that's ripping the band-aid off. And there's this arc where a friend comes along and says, I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to rebuild you. And he goes through this process of rebuilding him, but he's giving half his effort in the rebuilding because he's so scared. And finally, there's this moment where he's having this conversation with his wife, and she finally is pushing him. What are you afraid? What are you afraid of? And he's like, I'm afraid of losing everything. I'm afraid of losing everything. She says, what do we have that we can't be replaced? And he said, it's not the physical stuff. It's essentially my soul. And that's the turning point. And then he can start rebuilding. And then he comes back into the second fight at the end of the movie. And they do the coming together before the fight starts with the referee. And they're just staring each other down. And Mr. T says to him, like, I'm going to tear you up. Like, I'm going to destroy you. And Rocky does not look away from him. He maintains eye contact and he says, go for it. To me, that is a symbolic representation of what every man has to go through. That there's, I assume every person, but being a man, I can only speak for men. But I think that there has that like that's a symbolic representation of those thoughts that are in my head that run wild, the ego that's just constantly managing. I have to look it in the eye and say, no, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. Because the fear goes crazy. Like for me, and it still happens to this day, and it frustrates me, Matthias. I'm sorry, I'm being long-winded here. Like we're not used to it by now.
like, wait, I'm looking for new information here, Kevin. No, just kidding.
Right, right. It's not here. It's not here. I've had this fear probably since I was in high school. It is a completely and utterly irrational fear. But my fear is at some point in some sort of athletic pursuit, something's going to happen and my leg is going to snap in half. I'm going to break my tibia in half. Now, I can tell you exactly where that fear entered my life. There was a Super Bowl. And anybody who's a football fan would know this Super Bowl. The Bengals are playing the 49ers, and one of the Bengals defensive linemen goes after the quarterback and then somehow, some way gets bent back the wrong way, his leg snaps in half. And I saw it. And then there was another one, famous one, Joe Theismann. Again, the Redskins against the Giants, just right around that same time. He gets tackled, boom, same thing. Leg gets snapped in half. I was watching it. And that to me, like it imprinted on me. Like I can't. So for me, it's completely irrational. I'm running. I go to step off a curb. My thought is you're going to break your leg in half. And that was such a powerful thought that I would rearrange my running route so I didn't have to step off curbs for the longest time. And that thing in my head, that fear, that ego protecting me was winning, was in control. The darkness was in control. And so now what I have to do, I consciously do it. Now, when I go to step off a curb and that thought comes, I go, well, I'm going to do it anyways. We'll see what happens. That's my response to it now. And I think that that's all part of what's happening internally as the band-aid's getting ripped off and we're becoming who we were designed to be out of the fear and into freedom and union is I have to deal with that dark side. I have to deal with that thing that's been managing my life the entirety of my life. And I think the sad story is the majority of people don't do it.
I want to peel apart a few threads here. So I think back to the Rocky 3 example. It's very easy for us to understand, or even your statement before that. It's very easy for us to recognize danger in a physical sense, and so we've got one of our kids is just extraordinarily energetic, extraordinarily strong, and and like it's a reality. Like physically, uh, just physically stronger, and so it's easy to recognize that as a danger. It's like, all right, do I want to get a number
Right.
2 match or not? Yes or no. Even you look at MMA fighters or other types of fighting, you recognize that these guys can legitimately could legitimately kill you, and
Right.
and it doesn't have to be even at that level for that to be for us to recognize that. So physical danger is very easy to recognize. What we often don't recognize is the danger, the non-physical danger. And I think we see a lot of this within the context of different it's typically when you see people getting into cults or into some kind of abusive relationship, it's because they underestimated they didn't recognize just how dangerous the other person could be with their kind of nice surface behavior.
The parasitic nature of it.
Parasitic nature of it. What I find fascinating with some of the things that you were saying is that it seems to me like there's almost a sense of your eyes adjusting to the dark, and it's like when you only live in the sunshine, only look at the good side of all that you are, then that's all you see. All you see is kind of this black, this black area that you just avoid over here, this dark whatever.
Yeah. The
And
black cloud.
black cloud, or I think of this, it's kind of this weekend. My son and I spent some time in a friend's shop and he was exploring and all this stuff. But it's kind of like that moment when you walk into a dark building and it's pitch black. You spend some time there and you start looking around and shapes emerge and you're like, oh, well, here's this and here's that and here's the other thing. There's some form of that happens as we become familiarize ourselves with our shadow and become aware of kind of the depth of the damage that we can
Right.
do.
Right.
Almost like crystallizing, our eyes becoming accustomed to the dark.
I think it becomes, I think Jesus' statement about, if the world hates you, take heart because it hated me first, and take heart, like I have overcome the world, is like I went into the cloud. I went into the cloud and I came out the other side. You can do it. I paved the way for you. This is how we do it. And I think there's a psychologist up in the LA area. His name's Phil Stutz, and he has a number of books. He has a Netflix documentary, that kind of thing, but he uses a lot of imagery. He was trained psychoanalyst, and 5, 10 years into his career, he's like, we're not doing anything. We're putting band-aids on here. He's like, we have to get down deeper to these core emotions. So he's really attacking these core emotions, love, fear, all these things. And his fear exercise, what he does is he teaches his clients, okay, you have this feeling, this thought, this image that comes up, this fear that comes up. I want you to picture it as a dark cloud, which isn't very hard for us to picture it as. It's the common imagery we use. And he says, I want you to stand in front of it and not turn your gaze away from it. Just stare into it. And then I want you to walk through it. And I want you to see what's on the other side of that cloud. And in the walking into it, he says, you have to say, bring it on. Bring it on. That's his imagery for it. I think he's echoing Jesus in that as well, of we need to face our fears. You need to be courageous. You need to step into these things and face these things and not run away from them. And all the way back to Adam and Eve. They're afraid and then they hide and they start covering themselves in certain ways. Like that's the common human response. And so he's saying, take heart, be courageous, step into this. You're gonna see that this thing in front of you is really just a paper tiger. Hard, really hard, but it's just a paper tiger in front of me. Like one client one time who was doing what was like facing this memory and this fear, and I asked, do you want to step closer to it? Yeah. Okay. She stepped closer and closer and closer, and as she got closer to it, she used that imagery. It's a paper tiger. Okay, there you go. Are you afraid of that paper tiger? Not anymore. And they could take it and tear it up. That fear is gone now because you confronted it. And I suspect that there is, I feel like I know, but I think it's not fair to say I know. I suspect that all fears have this element to them. They have this element of elevation and expansion. And it's just manipulation to keep you in the place that you are. And I think that standing in front of it and stepping forward is allowing love, light, Jesus to expand into that space and dissipate the cloud. I think that's what we're talking about here. It's like with the niceness to me is we talked about niceness versus kindness dynamic. The niceness is an act of avoidance. I'm always managing and shifting and moving away and avoiding and that kind of thing to keep the environment peaceful, but it never brings peace.
Right.
It's like when Chamberlain stepped off the plane after meeting Hitler in Munich and said, peace in our time. He's been appeased. We all know how that worked out. It's funny, like Winston Churchill has this quote about how nice a guy Chamberlain was. He's a really nice guy. But and very Churchill-esque, he's like, this is what happens when nice guys are in charge. But then the opposite of that, or the other dynamic, I think is the way of Jesus, the way of kindness, where you are gentle and you're patient and you're loving and you're caring and you're compassionate, all these things, but you tell the truth. And so to me, the difference between the evil of niceness versus the union, the good, the union of kindness is the well we're drawing from. Am I drawing from the avoidance well, or am I drawing from the truth well? And that is why I brought that thought came up in the beginning. Like, what well are you drinking from?
So I mean, this touches on another question that I wanted to wrestle with a little bit, which is um, you would then use avoidance as kind of the litmus test for. I mean, the question fundamentally is what thing am I avoiding that I would rather admit not to be true at the moment?
Right. And I don't always, yeah, yes. I don't always, I'm going to try and make a nuanced point here. So please call me on it if it's not making sense, but it's making sense in my head. So we'll see. I think sometimes outside looking in, we could see somebody who's being still and not moving and steadfast in their position as avoidant. But that's not always the case. If I'm refusing to engage with you or fight with you or whatever the case may be, that like the model for that to me is Jesus when he's being tried in the high priest's courtyard. They've made all these claims about you. They've accused you of blasphemy and all these things. Do you have anything to say? And his response is, you have said it is so. Is that avoidance? So we have to be careful with what is avoidance.
So
But to your point, what you're saying, like yes, like I would equate evil with avoidance.
well, and so I mean, in this particular case, so if you define avoidance as simply avoiding the truth, I think there's an understanding that which I mean, this is how we've at least reconciled this kind of idea in the past has been there's a recognition that no amount of arguing is going to change the situation, and so
Right.
there is an admission of here's the circumstance, here's the truth, and one of the questions that I would follow questions with this is, and I don't know if I can tease all these apart, but there's very much this line of thought in which um, kind of the success mantra that just do what's unreasonable, just always be unreasonable. Like fear is just an illusion anyway. Just say what you're going to do, find a way to do it. Who cares?
There's the very manly take the bull by the horns and pull yourself up by the bootstraps and do that kind of thing. That's not
Right.
what we're saying here.
Okay, so draw a distinction between that line of thinking because there is a world in which when when you're choosing not to listen to fear, like that you could mistake one for the other.
Of course, of course. Well, to me, the biggest part of the kindness and telling the truth is at some point, let me say this. Jesus tells this story, I think it's in Matthew 6, where he's talking about if your friend is taking you to court, meet him on the path. That like have this conversation before you get to the courtroom, because if you get to the courtroom, you're probably gonna have fines and be in jail. So work the best you can to make peace. Okay, awesome. Love that. Totally agree. What happens if you're not able to settle it there? Because Jesus experiences that later. He does his talking. He performs what he needs to do. He shares what he needs to share, and still the situation is not resolved. So you're gonna have to get spit on your face. You're gonna have to take the lash of the what is it, cat of nine tails. You may get nailed to a cross. Now, in that moment, if you're doing it for the truth, okay. If you're silent for the truth, okay. If you're silent because it's like pleading the fifth, right? I'm not going to incriminate myself. That is not the truth. That is not holy. If I'm silent because I know when I speak, I'm not going to be listened to me, the the equivalent of Jesus's saying, don't throw your pearls of wisdom before the swine,
Right.
or your scraps, your wisdom to the dogs, so they'll turn on you and eat you. Like, what does it matter? What is it going to matter? There's this line in golly, you triggered so many thoughts in me with just starting here. We may have to make this into two separate recording sessions. There's this line in the book Atlas Shrugged where there's this character who's an industrialist and he's built his own company and they're trying to take stuff away from him and take this product that he's designed, this patent, and nationalize it. And so finally he refuses, so finally they bring him to court and they just list out all the things that he did that are against the law and da, da, da. And his response is so beautiful. The character's name is Hank Reardon. You may be able to find it online somewhere, and like just this blurb. But he does so brilliant. He goes, I do not, he says to the court, I do not recognize your authority to judge me. So this entire trial is a farce. Do what you're going to do because you were going to do it anyways. So, but I just want you to know, I do not recognize your legitimacy as a judge. And to me, that's very Jesus-esque in that trial before the high priest. I mean, he recognizes you're having this trial in the middle of the night in the high priest's courtyard. Why is that? Why is it in the middle of the night? And why is it in the high priest's courtyard? Because you're doing something you know you shouldn't be doing. So I'm not going to legitimize this by speaking. Why would I? And I think that's the kind of strength we're talking about, the strength of character, that if you are going to stand by the truth, you're going to take the punishment that comes with standing by the truth. Now, the Bruce Willis Die Hard character in that same position would pull out the Uzi and start shooting everybody, or like all that the take the bull by the horns or pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like they would do that. And that's the difference to me. Is what are you accomplishing there? Are you justifying yourself? Are you making the situation right? No. No, you're not. That's the meekness I think Jesus is talking about in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Well, the meek essentially are those who have a sword, know how to use it, but choose to keep it sheathed. Those are the type of people that will inherit the earth, not Bruce Willis.
So follow-up question though. How do you reconcile the man? I don't know if it was. Sorry, I'm gonna need time to piece my thoughts together. So there's always a series of events and choices that lead people to the place where they're at, right?
Mhm.
And so it's probably generally useful to operate from the assumption that people want to do well, and that given a different set of situations and choices that they might choose a different outcome. And yet that can also become an incredibly debilitating optimism. I mean, that optimism becomes
Right.
really harmful at the point that you extend it eternally to somebody who doesn't deserve it. Um,
Right.
and that deciding point, there is a place in which you do become a judge of the other person, judging by their conduct, judging by their responses over time, that realistically, this person is not going to listen, and adapting how you respond accordingly. So, like, maybe there isn't a clear answer. Maybe this is just where the mystery lies. But it seems like there's an ongoing tension of um, probably most of us fall either on one side or the other, like default to cynicism or default to endless optimism.
Right.
We land on one side of the fence, and so if you're on the side of the of the eternal cynic, then part of the discipline probably becomes to give people more time than you would naturally give them, to allow them to demonstrate the opportunity for change. And
Right.
conversely, if you tend to be the eternal optimist, to recognize that, and this goes kind of back to the shadow stuff we were talking about before, but recognize that your eternal optimism is allowing people to persist in evil and persist in destructive behavior, both for themselves and for others, instead of calling them out on it. And along with that, one of the dangerous parts of the hyper emphasis around power dynamics in recent conversations has been, and this may be getting into dangerous territory, but it's power dynamics themselves end up getting called into question. And quite frankly, sometimes you need power dynamics to keep the, especially these sweet, endearing, uh, nicely evil people in check.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that authority is needed. No doubt that power dynamics on, in this existence, on this earth, are necessary. My debate, my questioning of it is, what is the power dynamic based on?
So, what do you think it normally is based on, and what do you think it should be based on?
I think it should be based on the truth of who God is and what he said. And what it's mostly based on is human ego.
So, um, expand further. Can you can you like get I don't
Let me give
know.
you an example. Let me give you an example. George Washington, he had to be forced to become the first president of the United States. He wanted nothing to do with it, but he saw it was for the good of his country that he served those 8 years in office. And so he spent those 8 years and he already started to see the human ego starting to operate. Political parties, factions, backbiting, all that kind of stuff. So when he left in 1789, I think it was, go back and read his farewell address. He warns us of two things: foreign entanglements and political parties. Political parties is to me the front lines of human ego interaction. And then once those run the course and we develop this identity as a country, then all of a sudden we're going to start getting into foreign entanglements as well. And to me, it was that is a man who was selflessly serving for the good of people around him. Abraham Lincoln was another one. If you read his journals, he's quite clear that what he would want to be for the rest of his life was a merchant, a farmer, you know, a writer. He wanted this peaceful existence, but he feels pulled into this political maelstrom, and he serves to the best of his ability. And this man, when he puts together his cabinet, he chooses rivals because he wants every opinion in there. That is a man who is not serving out of his ego. He's serving, trying to do the best he can for the country he lives in. Now, where is the Abraham Lincoln or the George Washington in our current world? I'm not even gonna minimize it to America. Where are those selfless leaders in our world? And so to me, that's the authority structure is all based on power dynamics driven by human ego. And it is the rare person who will step outside of that and say, no, not what's best for me. It's what's best for everyone, for union.
Right. And to be as you were talking, was kind of thinking through these different types of scenarios. So, to clarify that point even further, it's not what's best for me. It's not what's best for you. It's not what's best for them. It's what's best for all of us, human thriving
Us.
together, us. So, in a parenting context, it's like there's a million and one ways that this can pan out. It's like, do I really want to deal with a 2-year-old's drive for independence and learning how to live in we and not me?
Right.
So
Because the 2-year-old mind is me and no
exactly.
as a way to establish me.
And the way to establish me. And it's again critical part of formation, and yet part of our role as parents. You can be like, all right, I'm exhausted, like I'm not going to deal with this, and legitimately you have to figure out how to play the short game and the long game to manage yourself well, so that you do have the capacity to run the long game. But it's a matter of seeking, to your point, and this is kind of, as you were talking, like running through this, like coming to much of the same conclusion. It's like, how do we do what's good for us? How do we do what's good for our children in that? Same thing in a church context. It's like, if you're if you're only looking, if somebody is leading a church, if a pastor is only looking out for their own good, or they're exclusively looking out for everybody else's good at the expense of their own, any of those end up being problematic. And so there's and you can relate this in business, in any type of environment. And so tying all of these pieces together, healthy authority, if you're looking at the good of the people, being willing to draw a line, being willing to confront, to speak truth, to confront evil where it exists. The only way that you can do that in a healthy way is if you have a deep familiarity with your own shadow and with the depth of evil and pain that you can cause. Sometimes it feels to me like much of the modern rhetoric, again, with the optimism around humanity, the focus on spiritual and personal development, it robs us of kind of I would call it a hack, except it's not really a hack, but the hack of a deep awareness and friendship with our own depravity and brokenness.
Yes. Right. It's not enough to be aware of the experiences of your life. I think what's more important is what we glean from the experiences of our lives, how we interpret them, the lens through which we see them, what wisdom, in air quotes, do we take from our experiences? To me, that's the powerful thing. Because I could be aware of my experiences. Hopefully, I am. And I could interpret them through the lens of victimhood, and I become a very different person than viewing it through the lens of discipleship. So for me, the standard, like the power dynamic, is not that there doesn't need to. It needs to be based on something stable, unmoving. And the only thing that I know of, and I suspect, and I know that the only thing that is stable in all of this is the person of Jesus Christ. That's the only thing stable. That's what I know. That's my lens through which I'm going to see the world. So a power dynamic based on love, compassion, grace, mercy, accountability, correction, all those things that scripture talks to us about. I fully and utterly support that with every last fiber of my being.
So then the follow-up question to this becomes, man, well, we keep circling this. We've never had a satisfactory conversation about it, I don't think. But the temptation always becomes. I mean, this even goes back to our last episode. The temptation is always to recognize the benefit. Is when we recognize the benefit that the system can give us and still choose to walk away.
Yes.
And
yes.
the more the system evolves, the bigger the system becomes, the higher the rank within the system, the more vulnerable, the stronger the pull, and the more vulnerable we become to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it Hamilton? Alexander Hamilton who said if men were angels, no government would be necessary. That's what I see happening because, like, yeah, how many stories have you heard of somebody starting out with this passion to make the world a better place and they enter the system and it ends up corrupting them? And the closer you get to absolute power, the closer to absolute corruption you get, the closer to pure evil you get in a human sense. What do we do with that? So what happens if you take Hamilton's quote? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. Okay, awesome. But what if that government systematically chooses people to be involved in it that have that ego power dynamic mindset? Then not even the government is a check against the capricious nature of human beings.
Well, I mean, my immediate thought when you were saying, or my thought when you were saying that was, what happens when the government needs a government?
Right.
I mean, democracy
And
is
here's the thing. The
supposed to be
government
that.
does have a government. We've just forgotten it. And by forgot, I mean chose to disregard because it was inconvenient.
Fair.
I watched this. I had never seen The West Wing before. And one of my friends, it's his comfort show. He goes to it when he's sick at home. He'll just binge watch episodes and he loves it. His favorite show. And it is a fabulous show. Well written, well done, all of it. Problem is if you watch that show, how many times do you see that breaking point? Well, this is what we should do as responsible human beings, but this is what's politically expedient. That is the dynamic throughout the entire show. And I think the show does a great job of illustrating what it's like. You take the iconic idealistic figure of President Bartlett in this show. He's Catholic and he's a principled man and he's an economist and he's all these things. And yet he gets pulled into this system of political expediency or doing the right thing. How do you avoid that?
Yeah.
Well, and think about you like if you study American history, multiple times throughout American history, there's been communities, utopia-like communities, that have seen what's happening in the world and have decided to close themselves off from the world. You can go back and look at them there. There's lots of examples of them. What ends up happening within those utopias? The same power dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, the whole, some of the segments of Christianity right now that need the highest level of accountability around tolerated abuses and misuses of power are the ones who have a really deeply rooted belief in essentially the angelic, divine, good nature of people, and
Right.
an unhealthy focus on strictly the good, uh, with no
I, well, I
little.
would
Go ahead.
I would nuance your statement with you have that extreme, but then you also have the other extreme, the total depravity of man.
Right.
Both of those are in severe need of reformation.
Okay, so in on the total depravity of man, you end up with people living under just mental anguish of.
Constantly, constant, just tortured, just tortured. And I always have to maintain this rightness. But you're a human being. How are you going to maintain this rightness? Aside from the presence of Jesus and the Holy Spirit living inside you, 100% of the time, all day, every day, which makes you a robot, essentially. How are you going to accomplish that total rightness?
Yeah.
You're not. You're going to be the older brother in Luke 15. I personally believe that Jesus is giving us an insight of what the end of all this looks like in Luke 15. There's going to be a few different, and he gives you two almost ultra symbolic conversations. The prodigal who goes away and destroys his inheritance, all that kind of stuff, and comes back, and the father welcomes him. You've been humbled. You've learned your lessons. You're here. And then the other conversation with the older brother. Where's my fatted calf for me and my friends to celebrate with? You're letting this punk come back in? I think in a very Jesus way, he's giving us this polar opposites of experience of what the end of all this will look like. Flannery O'Connor has this story. Get the name of it. Maybe it's called Revelation. I forget. It's one of her short stories. Tells this story of this lady. I think Miss Turpin is her name. She's in the doctor's office and she's sitting there waiting. Now, she views herself as a very proper, ordered, good person, and she has all her prejudices. She doesn't want to be this person. She was like, she looks down on these people, these people, these people, you know, all that kind of stuff. And she's sitting in the doctor's office, and this young girl comes up to her and like starts attacking her. And it's the culmination. And Miss Turpin looks at her and goes, "What do you got to say to me?" And the girl goes, "Go back to hell, warthog," or something like that. Like it's very Flannery O'Connor language. And then she goes back home. Miss Turpin goes back home. She has this experience at the end of seeing almost this procession into heaven. And she sees all the people that she looks down on, the freaks, she uses the N-word in it, all that kind of stuff. All these people dancing into the kingdom in front of the right posture and the right attitude and the right belief, walking solemnly behind. What I think is fascinating is she doesn't say this one's in, this one's out. That's what religion does. You're in, you're out. It says both are in. Just these ones are dancing in, and you're marching solemnly. I think she makes a fascinating point there. And I think she's echoing Jesus in Luke 15 because he doesn't make a comment on who's in and who's out there. The
Right.
father's like, all I have has always been yours to the older son. And he just grabs and hugs his younger son. There's a union there. There's a conversation. There's a connection there. He's not saying who's in and out. He's saying this is how you guys are going to approach it. I guess going back to the beginning where we started, that dynamic of kindness, gentleness, niceness, all that kind of stuff that could lead us to being viewed as a nice person. Like, if the motivation is me trying to get acceptance, belonging, being known and being loved and then knowing, me trying to get it, it's going to end up being manipulative and destructive. If I'm operating in those places in the knowledge that I'm already accepted, I already belong, I'm already loved, and I'm already completely and utterly known, then there's no manipulation or destruction there.
Right.
And it resists these black and white lines of, okay, Matthias, you're a good person because you do these things. And Kevin, you're a bad person because you do these things. It resists the black and white nature of that. It goes down to the motive. Evil is always earning and striving and needing and wanting and grasping and lusting. And good is receiving and then sharing, receiving and then sharing. Because this grasping is mine. This is I receive so I can share.
I don't know if I can fit these thoughts together, but there's you talked about kind of the two ends of the spectrum, and I think it's fair. I would draw I would agree with the conclude or with the conclusion, the thought that people drift towards the end of the spectrum based on their natural proclivities. That
Hmm.
and what I find missing, maybe in my own conversations, um, is on either extreme tends to be painted into a caricature. So either you have the you have these people who are perhaps highly agreeable, high openness to experience, and and the the upside of that is this capacity to demonstrate grace and acceptance in a world that often lacks it. And the downside of that is it can simply be straight up the lack of governance and accountability, like just simply not holding people accountable. On the opposite end,
Mhm.
people who are perhaps less agreeable, perhaps. I mean, just a fun fact, but there's I shouldn't even go here because I don't even remember the full details. But there's certain careers. Uh, I was talking with a client recently and talking about talent selection, which is really not one of my fortes, but this came up in conversation around certain individuals who do well in certain jobs simply because they have a low nuanced view of the world. Um,
Right.
Nuance does not always help you in every situation.
Oh
Um,
no, it's a burden to carry.
it's yeah, um, and so and so it's easy to look at people who perhaps naturally gravitate towards the opposite end of the spectrum, who see less nuance, who have higher certainty, perhaps more disagreeable, and immediately assume that that's and paint those individuals as in a negative light. And we have to
Mhm.
recognize that perhaps I mean, I think we have to fight the temptation to, I have to fight the temptation to reduce either ends of the spectrum.
Right. Right. You have to.
Because there's a genuine sense in which, and I think, looking back at my own relationship with my dad, there were a lot of misunderstandings around expressions of love. Yeah, and I think you probably experience this in some capacity with your dad. It's like, I'm going to show you love by showing you the calculated moves. Like if you do X and Y, like
Yep.
it's look, I can show you the math equation for how that's going to work out for you. And I
Oh
don't want
yeah.
to experience that.
Mhm.
And your experience then is like, okay, but I don't really want logic right now. I need a way to process my felt emotion in this experience that I'm having at the moment.
Right. Well, the thing that always strikes me now looking back, because there was no acknowledgement of this as a child and even into my 20s, of the fact that his lack of subtlety and nuance was a defense mechanism he had. And the reality was that he found a way that worked for him. And how well it worked for him, only God knows, because I'm not in his life and I didn't experience what he's experienced. But the reality was that there was a lack of subtlety and nuance in all of it. And I want to, for me, it kind of just struck me as like, yes, but I want you to know the felt sense of this for me. There's a level of being known there that I want you to know what I'm experiencing. You're telling me what I should experience, and maybe you're objectively right, but I want to share with you what I am experiencing. This is what I am experiencing. Is that okay to share? Are you open to hearing that? That, as I look back now, a lot of my frustration as a child and probably a lot of my emotional eruptions came from the frustration of, and even to this day, being misunderstood is one of the hardest things for me. And I think it goes back to that, like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. You see it as that, and I understand that you see it as that, but that's not what I'm saying. Will you just take some time and hear me? I'm not even saying agree with me. Just understand where I'm coming from. If that could have happened, I think it would be different. I'm not gonna say better, worse, no value judgment on it. My experience would have been different.
Sure. Makes sense. All right. Well, I mean, where to? Can you help me a little bit? Because I feel like in the last this last part here, there's a few threads that you were pulling together, and I don't know that I grabbed them all. Can you bring some of those pieces together for me?
I could try. They're basically some dangling pieces for me as well. I think the through line is this. We started with gentleness, kindness, niceness, those kind of things, and saying that there's a nuance to it. It depends on the motivation. Like if the motivation is grasping, I'm doing these things so I become accepted and belong, then inevitably that's a grasping thing, and that is going to turn parasitic. But if I'm doing those things, I am this person because I know already that I am loved and I'm known and I'm understood. That is a pure place, and it's going to be creative in nature. And so, like, we would like to black and white it and say, nice people are good and we should spend time around them, and these people are not good. But how do we define good? That's the key here, is how are we defining good? And as we walk through this, we're seeing all human responses to the circumstances in their lives, how we develop these ideas of good and bad, right and wrong, healthy and unhealthy. And as we come to it, what I think where we're landing on is it is determined by the heart motivation. Am I avoiding dealing with what it is that's in front of me in this very specific way, using these tools that I've developed to grasp what I don't have? Or, or am I in that place where I recognize I already have these things and I don't need to grasp? If you're in this place that where you have these things and you don't need to grasp, being put on trial, being whipped, being spit on, being crucified, these are not things that I'm going to avoid. Now, if I am so interested in attaining acceptance, belonging, being known and being loved in the knowing, and that's not happening, I'm going to fight to make sure it does happen. Brennan Manning asks this question in one of his books. I forget which one. He says, this all powerful, omnipotent God that we've been talked about, omniscient, omnipotent, all the omnis of God, does that sound like, does getting spit on, getting whipped, getting crucified, does that line up with all of those descriptors in our human conception?
Right.
I think power under control, meekness, gentleness, kindness, those are the characteristics of God. I think the truest power is to operate in meekness, is to have a sword, know how to use it, but choose to keep it sheathed unless it's absolutely necessary. And I don't think we as human beings are ever really going to figure out exactly what that looks like. I think we're stumbling towards it. I think some people are stumbling towards it, and I think some people are running away from it. But I don't think we're going to fully understand that until we're in the presence of God face to face. I think there are certain people who got close to that. Moses is one of them. At the end of his life in his eulogy, I think it's in Numbers or Deuteronomy, where it says he knew God face to face. Or Elijah, who gets taken away on a chariot, he doesn't die. Those guys are close. Jesus clearly is there, but I think most of us are stumbling towards that or running away from it.
And I think maybe my counterpoint to that is simply this, that even if we are stumbling, there has to be some kind of directional cue.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving in the right direction, that we're moving in that direction.
A vector.
A vector.
Jesus is the vector, that directional cue for me. He's the vector. Because you can't hold that thing in your hand. You can't hold a vector in your hand. It has intensity, it has direction. Jesus has intensity and direction. You've seen me, you've seen the Father. I'm pointing you towards him, and he's living that out, what it looks like to be in union with the Father and interact with people. That's the vector.
And this,
So it would come back to me, like it would come back to like you're looking for a direction and intensity, a where should I go? I can either trust my own view, my own sight, my own inclinations, my own intuition, or I can follow the one who did it. But that means my life is going to look like his. And you and I have both read the accounts of what his life looked like thousands of times in our lifetimes. And like Paul says, for the glory that was set before him, he endured the cross. Maybe we all have our own individual cross that we're bearing. Like Jesus tells us to pick up our cross and follow him. We all have our own individual Calvary that we're walking towards, stumbling towards, and hopefully to and through, like Jesus did. I saw this video earlier this week, and this girl's talking about how I was raised in Lutheran Reformed Church. I went to ministry school at Bethel. I've read the Bible every single day. Da, 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 and kind of giving the bona fides. And my initial thought was like, and her point was, I am this. And my initial thought was, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Like, doesn't matter. Those experiences are formative, but your interpretation of those experiences, does that have a vector? Does it have a direction that it's going? Because it could be very easy to have all those experiences and have me as the guide of what should happen. And I could take all those experiences, I could fold it into my ego and I could move forward in that direction. It's going to be destructive. If I have all those experiences and Jesus is my vector, my directional post, then I'm going to take all of those experiences and interpret it through that lens, and it's going to be a creative direction. Doesn't matter. I don't care about your bona fides. Who are you as a person? What's your motivation? That's what I care about for me and for everybody else.
I'm out of questions. So
Does this mean I won this one?
yeah, something like it. Something like it. Yeah.
I think the next step is to move towards the second topic we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
Like that whole idea of being able to express felt experiences like you were talking about with your dad, like wanting to be able to do that. I think that's the next step. Like, how do we allow that to be okay for each person, each individual to be able to share their felt experience?
Yeah. Yep. Which is a dovetail from the original conversation around be like me.
Yeah.
Kind of a natural follow-up to that. So cool. Well, we'll pick up the conversation there next time.
Yeah. That'll be fun.
Any closing thoughts from you?
And we said this before, but I feel the need to say it here again now. Like, we are two curious people that are asking questions of each other and trying to kind of suck the marrow out of our experiences with that vector towards Jesus. This doesn't mean that we're right or we're experts or we have all this down. By no stretch of the imagination do we. Like, we're trying to be curious and we value so much like comments and thoughts and what about this? And like it just adds to the conversation. So we highly value that for anybody who's listening, watching, like to be able to share their thoughts and feelings. Like you just create more nuance in the conversation, and a better experience for us all. So thank you for those of you who comment and engage, and you really appreciate it. And if you haven't, please do.
100%. Sounds good. Well, I'll echo that, and thank you so much for the conversation, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, till we meet again.
Till we meet again.